The sound of her voice cut through the air like a knife. "Don't enter!" she screamed, her hands trembling, her eyes wide with fear. The Millionaire CEO froze mid-step, his hand still on the door handle. Something about the maid's voice wasn't just desperate, it was terrified, as if she knew that opening the door would change everything. Forever, Daniel Whitmore was a man who had built his empire from nothing. A young millionaire CEO whose name commanded respect in every boardroom he entered. His life ran like clockwork: meetings, deals, and decisions worth millions, all executed with a steady, unshakable confidence. But that morning was different. He had cut his meeting short and returned to his sprawling mansion earlier than expected, his polished black shoes clicking against the marble floor. The air inside felt strangely heavy, almost as if the house itself was holding its breath. Grace, his longtime maid, was in the hallway polishing the silver tray, her hands moving faster than usual. She was a quiet woman in her 50s, with deep brown eyes that usually carried a calm, motherly warmth, but today they darted nervously toward the west wing. Daniel noticed the tremor in her hands and the way she avoided his gaze, but he didn't think much of it until he began walking toward his private study. Without warning, Grace dropped the tray with a sharp crash, the silver clattering across the floor. "Don't enter!" she screamed, her voice cracking in a way Daniel had never heard before. He stopped in his tracks, startled. Her face was pale, her breathing uneven, and her eyes wide and almost wild were locked on him. "What?" he asked, his brows knitting together, but she didn't answer right away. She stepped closer, almost as if trying to block his path. "Please, sir." "I'm begging you," she said, her voice trembling. "Don't go in there." The intensity in her tone made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Daniel, a man used to being in control, found himself frozen, his hand halfway to the study door, wondering for the first time in years if he should listen. Daniel's pulse quickened, a mix of irritation and unease simmering inside him. "Grace, what on earth are you talking about?" he asked, his voice low but firm. The older woman's hands trembled as she clutched her apron, her eyes darting toward the closed study door. "Please, sir." "Just trust me," she said, almost whispering. "Don't open it." Her tone wasn't that of an employee overstepping boundaries. It was the raw, urgent voice of someone trying to save him from something he couldn't yet see. Daniel's brows furrowed. The study was his sanctuary, a place no one dared enter without permission. It held his most private files, business records, and personal keepsakes. "Grace, you're being ridiculous." "There's nothing in there but my things," he replied sharply, taking a step forward. But she moved quickly, standing between him and the door, her small frame tense with determination. "It's not your things I'm worried about," she said, her voice shaking. "There are things in this house you don't understand. Things that were here long before you." Daniel felt a chill creep up his spine. "You're saying someone's in there?" She swallowed hard. "Not someone, something." He stared at her, trying to read her expression, but there was no hint of deceit, only fear. "Grace," he said slowly, "I don't know what game you're playing, but it ends now." He tried to step around her, but she caught his wrist with surprising strength, her eyes locked on his, pleading. "If you open that door, sir, there's no going back. Once it knows you, it never lets go." Daniel's breath caught for just a second, the weight of her words pressing against his chest. He prided himself on not being superstitious, but for the first time, doubt seeped into his mind. Still, he reached for the handle, Grace's grip on Daniel's wrist was firm, almost desperate, as if letting go would doom them both. "Sir, I've served this house for 15 years, she began, her voice trembling but steady enough to carry the weight of her truth. "I've cleaned every corner, heard every creak in the floors, every whisper in the walls. I've kept your secrets and your father's before you, but the thing behind that door, it's not yours and it's not human." Daniel felt an uneasy knot form in his stomach, but his pride refused to yield. "Grace, my father died in that room." "Are you saying it had something to do with?" She cut him off sharply. "I'm saying I was here that night. I heard it moving." Not footsteps, something heavier, slower, like it was dragging itself across the floor. Your father went in to confront it. 10 minutes later, he was gone. Daniel searched her face, looking for signs of madness, but found only sincerity and deep-rooted fear. You should have told me, he muttered, though part of him already knew she never would have been believed. Grace's eyes glistened. I hoped it would leave once the old master was gone. But it hasn't. This morning I heard it again. Scratching, whispering, calling your name. The words sent a cold shiver down Daniel's spine, yet he fought to mask it. I'm not afraid of ghost stories, he said, trying to sound in control, but his voice wavered just enough for Grace to notice. She shook her head. This isn't a ghost. Ghosts don't lock doors from the inside. Ghosts don't write letters. The last sentence struck him oddly, making his curiosity burn hotter. His hand inched toward the doorknob once more. Grace, her voice breaking, whispered, If you touch that handle, sir, you'll wish you hadn't. Daniel's fingers closed around the cold brass handle, the metal biting against his skin as if warning him one last time. Grace's ragged breathing filled the hallway, but he pushed the door open anyway, the hinges groaning in protest. A faint draft rushed past him, carrying with it a scent he couldn't place, something metallic, almost like blood. The study appeared exactly as he'd left it, shelves lined with leather-bound books, his mahogany desk polished to a shine, the tall window draped in heavy curtains. But there was something wrong. The air inside was heavier, thicker, pressing against his chest. His eyes were drawn to the center of the desk where a single black envelope lay. It hadn't been there that morning. The wax seal glistened deep crimson, marked with a strange symbol, two intersecting circles with jagged lines running through them. Daniel stepped forward, each footfall unnervingly loud in the silence. As his fingers touched the envelope, the lamp on his desk flickered violently, casting long, warped shadows across the room. For a moment he thought he heard whispering, faint but urgent, coming from somewhere deep within the walls. He broke the seal and unfolded the paper inside, expecting contracts or threats from a business rival. Instead, 5 chilling words stared back at him in uneven, scrawled handwriting. I know what you did. A rush of cold spread through his veins, his mind flashing to things he'd buried long ago, choices he'd made that no one could possibly. No, behind him, Grace stood in the doorway, her face pale and eyes wet with dread. I tried to stop you, she murmured, almost too softly to hear. The whispering in the walls grew louder, and Daniel realized it wasn't coming from the house at all. It was coming from somewhere. Much closer. Daniel's grip on the paper tightened until it crumpled in his fist, his heartbeat thundering in. His ears, the whispers swelled, no longer distant, curling around him like invisible hands. They spoke his name, stretching it out with a hiss that made his skin crawl. Who put this here? He demanded, turning to Grace, but her expression told him she already knew. It's not a who. It's a what, she said, her voice trembling. It feeds on guilt. It finds what you've hidden, what you fear most, and it makes you face it until it destroys you. Daniel's mouth went dry. He thought of that one terrible night years ago, his father's last moments, the heated argument, the push he had always told himself was an accident. The room seemed to darken, the shadows stretching unnaturally along the walls. Suddenly, the study door slammed shut with a deafening crack, locking Grace outside. Daniel pounded on it, shouting, but her muffled voice came through, pleading. It's too late, sir. Don't answer it. The whispers turned into a low, guttural voice right behind him. I know. Daniel spun around and froze. In the corner stood a figure, hunched and shrouded in darkness, its face an eerie reflection of his own twisted into a malicious grin. The figure stepped forward, its movements jerky, almost unnatural, and Daniel felt an unbearable weight pressing on his chest. The paper in his hand burst into ash, the whispers now screaming inside his head. What do you want from me? He gasped. The figure leaned in until its cold breath brushed his ear. Everything. The lamp flickered one last time, and then the room fell into darkness. When the door finally creaked open, Grace stepped inside. The study was empty. Daniel Whitmore was gone, and the envelope lay neatly on the desk once more.